Emma Darcy had some really cool things to say also about this moment. They said that Rhaenyra and Daemon are made of the same stuff. It's why they are a terrible match. And they really also said it's a dangerous chemistry. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I need you to let Emma Darcy tell me all about their character. Like, it's so cool. And they said basically Rhaenyra's fear of abandonment is healed when Daemon accepted her. And so the character of Rhaenyra is no longer trying to shield from these rumors, but take them head on, because it's this fear of abandonment has been healed. And I just thought that was a really interesting take on the character. And I do feel like that showed.
Hi, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this is Welcome to the Writer's Room, where we analyze media in various forms and tell you why it works or why it doesn't.
Today we're talking about House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 7, titled Driftmark.
Very exciting. Quick spoiler warning before we get into it. Not only will we talk about the show House of the Dragon, but all is fair game. That is the Game of Thrones series. Any book in the universe, Fire and Blood, any mythos, anything at all pertaining to Game of Thrones could possibly be spoiled. You've been warned.
Okay. Summary?
Yes. Let me pull out the timer.
Okay.
I'm so nervous.
This is a good one. It's short.
All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
You didn't say Dracarys.
Oh. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Dracarys.
We open on Laena's funeral and the whole family is there. The Valyrians are grieving, Otto is back as Hand of the King, and Viserys and Daemon have reunited. Later that night, Rhaenyra and Daemon connect over their losses while a young Aemon seeks out Vhagar, bonding with her and eventually riding her. Baela, Rhea, Jace, and Luke all go to confront Aemon over stealing Vhagar. This turns into violence and ends with Lucerys gravely cutting Aemon's eye. The entire family is before Viserys, who is demanding answers. It comes out that before the fight, Aemon called Jace and Luke bastards. Viserys calls for an apology to end this, while Alicent claims an apology is not enough and into her own hands by stealing Viserys' dagger and charging. Rhaenyra stops her and the two have a standoff, which ends with Alicent cutting Rhaenyra. Aemon truly ends the fighting by saying the price is worth it because he now has Vhagar. Before leaving Driftmark, Otto claims he now sees Alicent wants to play to win, and together they can do so. The episode ends with a plot to fake Laenor's death, allowing for Rhaenyra and Daemon to marry in true Targaryen fashion.
Nice. 57 seconds.
Yeah.
Nice. Very succinct. Is the episode also succinct? We're going to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. So do we want to just jump right into
I think so.
Scene 1?
Mm-hmm.
So we just open on it's Laena's funeral. We saw her. She was burned by Vhagar last episode because of her problems with childbirth. And she is, they're basically just having a funeral service for her. They have her uncle, I think her uncle Vaemond, is giving the words at the service in High Valyrian, and they're sending her casket-esque off into the sea. We see throughout this, it's kind of this starts all the way probably half an hour, 20 minutes of just a lot of eye contact and a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, I think this is another commendable thing that they tried. I'm just not sure how actually effective it was.
Yeah, I agree. Some moments were like the shot where we get Otto adjusting his lapel or his coat.
I thought that was cool. The pan down to see that he's the Hand of the King again, really quick, show me, don't tell. That was great. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is just an issue with tone throughout the scene, because we're at a funeral, but it's pretty clear that not everybody is the same level of sadness.
Yeah.
Whether they be not sad at all. You see Aegon just sort of looking bored like always. You see Daemon, who I believe is sad, he's mourning, but he's doing it in his way, which is bothering everybody. But on top of all these complicated emotions, you have this really thick, dramatic musical texture happening, which again, it's sort of showcasing to me that the creators weren't super solid in the idea that the story itself could tell itself, and I think it's a crutch that is doing more harm than good, especially in this scene.
Yeah, I agree. So after this sort of reading in High Valyrian, then we get this moment where it's the after the service sort of, and
is it a wake?
Yeah, I guess so is what you call it. And we just keep kind of bouncing from person to person. So we see a lot of small things happen one right after the other. And it's odd because we only gain a small amount of information. So I think if you were going to do this minimal dialogue approach, which don't get me wrong, I love moments with minimal dialogue, but I think if you're going to do that, then we need to gain something from it. And we didn't gain a lot. So it starts with Rhaenyra asking Jace, like, where's your dad? Which is, again, that's not new information that Laenor is not a very available father or husband. And Rhaenyra tells Jace to go and sort of try and give his condolences to his cousins. And he says he's got an equal claim to sympathy and should be at Sir Harwin's funeral.
Yeah, which I do think this showcases like Jace's character kind of well. Like he's smart, you know, even though he's young, which is cool. But again, it's a very small amount of information and a pretty big amount of time that the scene is giving us.
Yeah, and we see, as we're bouncing from people to people, we see Alicent watching sometimes. And that is kind of, we know that that's sort of her character. That's kind of what she does. And so she sees that instance. And I'm not sure how much we're supposed to understand what she's getting across from it.
Yeah.
But I think it looks to me like we're supposed to get that she's fully understanding the situation.
And I feel like that's another thing. I wrote down, where is it? Far too much time just looking around and doing nothing. And
Yeah.
I like, you can convey a lot with looks and things like that, but I don't know if they've had the groundwork to really do that. You know, we've had one episode in this sort of timeline. I think I understand how Rhaenyra and Alicent are feeling.
Yeah.
I think I get how Kristen is feeling. Otto's been pretty out of the game, you know, so I'm not sure where he's feeling. I feel like I know where Viserys is. But especially later on in the scene when all this additional tension happens, it's hard to do a sort of standoffy scene and it really mean a whole lot right now.
Yeah. And it just, yeah, I think if you didn't have any of this, it would almost be the same. Like if we cut all of this out,
yeah,
like what is absolutely necessary about this?
Yeah.
I can't even think of anything.
I feel like this is the second funeral scene of the series where they've kind of dropped the ball on making it more than what it is physically, right? It is literally just people at a funeral.
Yeah.
The main difference I would say is throughout this scene, they're sort of outside as the day goes on and the sun goes down and they try to do a day for night look.
Yeah.
And it looks atrocious.
Well,
it's terrible.
So what happened was when they filmed it, it was daytime.
Yes. And you can, like, they obviously just turn the brightest down. You can see crisp shadows on the ground.
Yeah. And I mean, the sky looks lit up.
Yeah.
Right? Their faces are just dark. So that kind of, we have a little bit before we like get to that, but it's sort of getting there as this scene is going on. And once we're there in the dark, it's just, it's rough. It's really hard to see.
It's hard to see. And it doesn't look good. Like it is the ungraded gray kind of look. That really, I mean, it takes me really out of the story being told. Cause one, like you said, I can't really see anything, especially when we get more towards the actual like nighttime of the events. But it's just, it's gross. It's hard to look at and it's hard for me to like stay invested. So
at this wake, this part of the funeral, I guess their goal was character motivations. And I think that's what we were supposed to get from each little interaction. We see Helena sort of with her spider and she's ends up sort of spewing stuff that's going to be the blacks versus the green. And Aegon's being a jerk and we're foreshadowing that he's going to be terrible to women, especially these handmaidens. We see Larys watching Alicent. Kristen sees that Larys is watching Alicent. And right, it's all these really small things that keep happening. I would say one that is notable is Corlys talking with Lucerys, saying, you're going to be the Lord of Driftmark one day. It's your birthright. And Luke says he doesn't want it because that would mean everyone's dead. And I thought that one probably stood out the most. Yeah, that also made me think a little bit about how they're attacking Helena's character, because I get this removed vision thing. Yeah. But I almost saw, because you can read into, you know, I don't think they were trying to make it go for a prophecy or anything, but when he does say like everybody will be dead, and you just land on the scene of Corlys, that scene was brought in my head towards the end of the episode, and we'll get to it later. But when
Laenor fakes his death at the end, and Corlys is like lost another child, you
Yeah.
know? And I just think like that was more impactful to me because it was sort of an emotional outburst. So if they gave
Mhm.
Helena these moments of like maybe not super ditzy controlled, but like sort of like raw energy almost
Mm.
with these visions, I feel like that might have been a little more interesting.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
You
Right
know?
now, it just is. I guess it's just boring.
It's boring. And they did the thing where she has the spider and she crushes it in her hands and they do the big dramatic music cue. But it's like, ugh.
Well, I love a prophecy. I love someone that can see the future. I think that's
Mhm.
always so much fun. But yeah, they just have done it in a boring way because there's no stakes with it. Either the audience needs to see like, hey, everyone needs to be listening to her, or it's supposed to feel like, oh my gosh, I caught that. I caught what she was saying as an
Yeah.
audience member. Or it needs there just has to be, I as an audience member need to have some emotion tied to what she's doing, some sort of feeling. And right now I'm like, here she goes again.
Mhm.
You know, because she's just sort of,
And it's hard to like add character to that when
Yeah.
you're told to perform it in that sort of way. So it's hard for me to like find a connection to enjoy when she's on screen, for me to find those moments to be like, oh, I bet that's a prophecy.
I think it's, yeah, I think it goes back to the dialogue.
I agree. No, I completely agree. I think it's a
Because-
writing, directing issue.
Yeah, we're back in sort of, there was some more, this heightened language in this episode, not as much
Which
as
I
last
did
episode.
enjoy.
But when you have that, Helena's stuff just fits right in.
Yeah.
You
For
know,
sure.
it doesn't feel like it stands out as different. Or maybe if they had a song that underscored it, some
Mhm.
sort of music to help you sort of realize like, hey, there's more to this than her just rambling. That might have been cool. Some sort of like creepy-esque music might have been cool.
Yeah. I also, speaking of music, the again, we start with this really dramatic funeral music, and then when Jace goes over to console his nieces,
Mhm.
again they have this like really weird upbeat sort of inspirational music cue happening, and I think the music was doing a lot, but not in a good way this episode. Like it was just another thing that kept taking me out of it.
Okay.
Because I don't think they really landed on what the emotion of the scene was supposed to be.
Yeah, I agree. And anytime someone dies, a lot of in a political drama, it's really supposed to feel like a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw that when Damon's wife before died, and we've seen it we've seen it in multiple instances. So there wasn't anyone trying to take advantage of that, which
Yeah.
I don't know who would have. Well, Laris,
Yeah.
Otto, someone would have, right? Someone.
I mean, the only person who really like did anything was Aemond.
Yeah,
You know?
that's true. The only real like plot development was Aemond and I guess Lucerys, because Aemond loses his eye. But yeah. So we don't even see, there's not even any like scheming going on at the funeral, which not that I feel like I need scheming,
Mm-hmm.
but it was all just one layer. We see Laenor is standing out in the sea, which I thought that was nice. I liked that.
If anybody's gonna like really be mourning, I think it's him. But I think another big issue is we still like we had a really good episode establishing who she was in the last episode, but I feel like as an audience member, I don't have a huge connection to Laena.
Yeah.
So I personally am not super sad when she died. Like that sucks. Obviously, I'm not happy, but
I was like, oh, but
I'm not like, oh no, I'm really gonna miss that character, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if the audience isn't connected to it, either you need to treat it like a political stepping stone, like you were saying, or we need to see the turmoil that these characters are in. And Laenor does get the closest, but it's still like a 2 seconds of him in the water and Corlys gets mad and then it changes.
Well, this was what was I'm gonna say it. I thought this was poorly done. So Corlys goes to Carl with a cue and specifically tells him to retrieve his patron, and
loudly,
I'd say. And lots of people are watching, and then Corlys's brother tells him to calm down. And I guess people are supposed to realize that Laenor and Carl with a Q are together. Right? Is that what, and that the way Corlys was acting is giving it away? Yeah. But I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, and it comes at a weird time, because you can argue, oh, maybe Corlys is just overcome with grief. But at the same time, he had a very civil discussion with Jace. Was it Jace?
Lucerys.
Okay. About like ruling Driftmark one day. So he's obviously one to keep his composure. So when he just blurts out like that, it's like, what?
Yeah, it didn't really fit his character, and it didn't really matter. It didn't
Mhm.
add anything or take anything away. No one's actions were changed by it.
Yeah.
So then Viserys goes to Daemon, and I thought this dialogue was actually nice. Viserys is talking about how his girls are the spitting image of their mother, and that it's a comfort, but it's also not.
Mm-hmm.
And Viserys says the gods are cruel, and Daemon says they've been cruel to you, meaning because Viserys looks pretty bad. And again, we just have Rhaenyra watching, and Viserys wants Daemon to come back to King's Landing. So the point of this was them connecting after it's been 10 years of them not seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
But Daemon doesn't go back to King's Landing. He never considers going back to King's Landing after this. He even says, like, my home is in Pentos. So again, what was the point of this little interaction?
Yeah. And I like, again, like it's characters doing things, but I feel like I would have known that about them even if I didn't see that scene, you know, like they
Yes.
haven't changed in all this time apart. So
Right.
you know,
Well, exactly. That's who Viserys was. He's going to forgive his brother. We've seen that time and time again.
Mhm.
It's nothing different. Actually, the last time they were together was the wedding, and they were together. He didn't like banish him after the wedding again.
exactly. Yeah.
So I just didn't achieve anything.
And I think that's what happened. And they even say in the after episode, it's like 50 people on set. It's all these little, sort of little stories going around everywhere. But when 40-50% of the stories either don't go anywhere or don't mean anything, it makes for a really slow first 20 minutes.
Well, yeah, it does, because nothing interesting happens until Aemond gets Vhagar, and that's not interesting because I can't see it.
Exactly.
And
I was
then-
about to say, while this boring stuff is happening, the sky is literally turning the ugliest shade of gray. And I'm just like, it is hard to watch and to listen to now.
Yeah, and so the only interesting thing is once we get later into the sort of meeting about what has happened with the
Yes.
kids.
Yeah.
But I'll keep going with this scene. So
Okay.
Otto tells Daemon sorry for his loss, which I thought that little moments like that, like to me, that mattered enough to have, it
Mhm.
was important enough, because it kind of it gives you a question in the audience's mind of, is he being truly sorry, or how,
if not, like, what is he hoping to gain from this interaction?
Right. And then Rhaenyra sees it and tells her kids to go to bed, which
Mhm.
tells me that, yeah, she doesn't trust him. And I do think Otto is being genuine. I don't feel like Otto is just a jerk, you know?
Yeah.
Even though they
At
really
least
hate each
somewhat,
other.
for sure. Yeah.
I feel like I wish maybe it's clear to me that Otto and Daemon absolutely cannot stand each other from episodes prior.
Yeah.
So I wish we would have kept that going. So Daemon could have absolutely been like, do not talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that might have been
And he
fun.
does say something cheeky, but it's just like, we've done this dance before.
Yeah. So then Viserys is going to go to bed, and he calls Alicent Emma.
Yeah. Which,
And-
like, that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
That's the simple mistake, but so many more things. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, that's the build up that I was looking for throughout this entire scene.
Yes.
I wrote down that was the most / the only tense moment in this whole entire scene. And
And-
that was good.
And Kristen Cole sees that
Mm-hmm.
and clearly has an opinion on it. And yeah, it was interesting. And then Otto finds Aegon. Carl takes Laenor, and that's like how that ends.
Yeah.
And we see Aemon seeing Vhagar, and that's it. And then we cut to Rhaenys and Corlys discussing sort of this death of their son, and Rhaenys is blaming Daemon for it.
Yeah. And this sort of kicks off, I feel like a lot of scenes in this episode are like this. I don't know if I would consider the first scene a good scene, but it's got enough going on that I like can remember it, right?
Yeah.
This next scene between Rhaenys and Corlys, one, it's got some good things. I think their chemistry, as always, those two
Mhm.
actors are just phenomenal with each other. You know?
Yeah. Well,
I think the colors in the shot are really good. Them being backlit by this fire and
Yeah.
there's blue in the moonlight. I think that's great. But if you were to ask me anything they talked about, I wouldn't know.
no, yeah, because it didn't matter.
Exactly.
And
Where these scenes are just passable, you know? Because they look pretty and the actors are doing a good job. So you're like, okay, I guess it's good TV. But then you think about it and you're like, I haven't gained anything in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, so Rhaenys feels like Corlys doesn't really have this need to sort of avenge his wife and those who have wronged her by not giving her the crown. And she's like, it's been 10 years. It's your own ambitions at this point. It's not about me.
Yeah. And it just comes at a weird time. They're like, oh, are the gods spiting us right now? Well, this of all days, can you not talk about this? We haven't seen them in a while.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what they've been up to.
Yeah. So and I've wondered this for a few episodes now, if Corlys is genuine in his feelings for him wanting his wife to be on the throne, because that would mean he's king consort.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty genuine.
I felt like it was pretty genuine too. So if I heard a question and I'm like, oh, now I don't know. Is she just mad? Is she just upset? So we gain a question, and a question from a scene's not enough. Rhaenys wants to pass Driftmark to Baela because she knows Rhaenyra's children are not related to Corlys. I just think this scene pretty much, the only thing probably that needed even a little bit to be said is that Rhaenys does not believe Rhaenyra's children are Laenor's children.
Yeah, but which, again, like, we know. Like,
yeah, we haven't heard her say it directly, and we haven't heard Corlys say it directly, but they literally said last episode, everyone with eyes.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And it's not like them knowing, they're not telling anyone. They're not doing anything with this information. So it's just another group of people being like, hey, just in case you're not aware, those kids are illegitimate.
And I think instead, this very much could have happened at the funeral.
Yeah.
We didn't need a whole new scene for it.
I was wondering, because we talked about this last episode, I was thinking this whole, because sort of the episode does take place over like a few hours or a day or somewhat. And I feel like they could have cut it in a different way, where I wanted all these private talks to happen while everyone was around, like in, shoulder to shoulder meetings.
Now there's stakes because we have to whisper and we have to look around and see, is someone going to overhear us? And
exactly. And I was also thinking, like, it's the stuff with the kids and Aemon taking Vhagar is cool. I like that. I feel like all the stuff before would have been better if it would have happened after or during, even, like, I just feel like, again, it was almost too chronological in what was happening. Like, I wanted things happening at the same time. Like, don't tell me the kids aren't gonna go away from the boring ass wake to go like fuck around and be kids, and then he's like, I'm gonna steal Vhagar, and then while they're having a tuffle about who's gonna rule Driftmark, they hear Vhagar take off or something. Just cut that dead time out.
That's true. No, I agree. And the scene, honestly, it very much looks like to me they were like, how do we end this? Corlys says, history does not remember blood, it remembers names, and walks away. Do you know how pissed I'd be? I'd be like, we're not done.
That is a
we're
cool
not
line,
done.
But I was like, my man, you did not win this conversation.
What do you mean? You don't just get to drop a one-liner and head out. That's just not realistic. And she's just like, yeah. And sitting there by the fire. So I just thought they had no clue where to go with this scene. There's not a beginning, middle, and there's nothing to it. And then Rhaenyra and Daemon are walking on the beach discussing her sons. Was that
Rhaenyra and Daemon? I couldn't tell because it was too dark.
Yeah, it was actually. And basically they just kind of are openly discussing that her sons are not legitimate and that she tried to have Laenor's children, which was kind of fun to hear that she tried it, even though we kind of knew that. She said that last episode, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I get it. You're going to have a scene where the two of them are reconnecting for sure.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to talk about stuff that we do know and they don't know because they don't have to talk to each other. I get it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like this one was another one. It was okay. Like, I don't have any huge issues.
I liked this one better than the one before. So far, out of these 3 scenes we've seen, this one was the best.
Yeah. And again, it's not necessarily that we're learning anything. I do think, again,
it's plot.
Yeah. The actors convinced me that their chemistry is still there. So
yeah,
that's good,
absolutely.
So when the events later on transfer, like, I feel like that was set up, which is nice.
I agree. And so Daemon says basically that Otto and Alicent would use Harrenhal's curse as an excuse to murder Harwin and Lionel Strong, and Rhaenyra doesn't believe they could do that.
Yeah.
Which they didn't, sort of. Like, it wasn't really, it was Larys And
I do think it's cool that immediately Damon can sort of clock that, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's something he would do.
Yeah, totally.
So that's neat to me, and it shows that Rhaenyra still like has an idea of who Alicent is, which is nice.
Yes.
I don't know. How did you feel about the sex scene?
I will read you what I said. I might have liked this scene if I could have seen the actors. I mean it like it was just like if there's no dialogue and it's just a sex scene, then I can't see anything. I don't know what's happening. So I thought the lead up to it was kind of weird. Rhaenyra's just like touching his chest.
Yeah.
And he's like, Rhaenyra.
And I think it's again like I truly don't know how Damon feels because I've heard conflicting sources from different people on the project at this point, right? Like, did he really love Laena? Is he actually mourning? Does he just like, is he doing this to get over this? Is he doing this because he doesn't really care? And I just, either any option is fine. It's too gray for me to really understand who he is right now.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. It was like sensual and that's nice, like slow, and it's like on the beach, so it's sweet. I thought it was fine. It like didn't. Yeah, it feels like Damon truly cares about Rhaenyra, and that's nice to see. They love to have Emma Darcy look right into that camera. They did it, I think, 3 times in this episode. And I think that's really funny. They just really love to do that.
It's the she's looking, and then they suddenly rack focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get to... Well, actually, I want to talk about what Emma Darcy talks about in the after episode a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Because they had some really cool things to say. I think this was the best after the episode that I've seen. I think just there was a lot of good information. And basically they were saying Rhaenyra's fear of abandonment is healed when Damon accepts Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool. And I think that we do see that with her character Rhaenyra being just so much, the sexual scene being like sweet and different from how we've seen it before. I think we do get that.
I agree. Yeah. And I think having the actors talk in the after episode is always fun. Like they had a lot of people. They had Rhaenyra, they had Viserys talking, and it's just fun to hear like their perspectives.
It is, yeah. And then we have Aemond running on the beach. At this point, I was pretty bored because, again, this is just a scene with no dialogue, and it's supposed to be tense because you're supposed to be afraid of him and like him feeling like he's in danger. But if you can't see it, and like I hate to just bring it back to that because that's annoying.
Yeah,
it's like that's what everyone says, but like it's true. This scene, we just went from a scene that was very minimal dialogue, all about how they're treating each other and touching each other, to a scene all about how this character is moving. And we literally cannot see it. So I'm just like, I could have my eyes closed right now.
Yeah. Well, and I have a few things to say. One, they go from Rhaenyra and Daemon in their little like tent or whatever. And then they cut to Aemond looking out. And this is the second time I've seen this episode. And I do not know what he was looking at. So I like the first time I remember thinking like, oh, he saw them doing it. He's going to have that info. And then it never came back. So now he was just sort of like doing his own thing on the beach.
Just looking at Vhagar,
which
basically.
is fine. But again, like it is literally so dark and like poorly day for nighted that I do not know what is happening at all. And then he goes up to Vhagar, and again, I think Vhagar's design is really cool.
Yeah.
Love looking at Vhagar. I really wish it would have shown Aemond being like a warrior or brave or knowing something about dragons because he's really into them, or something specifically to get Vhagar to be like, okay, yeah, you can ride me. Because to me, it looked like anybody could just go up and do that. And I feel like, especially knowing later on what happened, like we know Aemond grows up to be like a very strong warrior and a very like ruthless, like Targaryen kind of guy. And I wish something would have been planted in this scene because I feel like at this point Baela could have walked up and taken Vhagar. You know?
Yeah, I could have.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as I just know the words, the High Valyrian words.
And I thought it was another cool example to contrast just how different Aegon and Aemond are from Jake and Luke, because we see their sort of dragon bonding with the tiny little guy, and he's like feeding them, and he's like, oh, it's all fun. And to have Aemond, one, already othered for not having a dragon, but two, having his earning a dragon be like violent and really dangerous, and he's having to be a lot smarter than everybody else. I feel like that would have done a lot to characterize him in the scene, which That kid is great. He's doing a great job.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
And
he's also a cutie pie.
He's in the after episode. He's saying a lot of really smart things.
He is, yeah. He was basically saying that like Aemon changes after getting the dragon, and his upbringing has led him to be this way. It was just very, very smart.
Cool. So I wish they would have just like worked with him a little more to show that visually in that scene.
Or just, I don't know, there could have been a catch with it, something he did.
Exactly. Well, like he's always going into those pits. So I would not have any doubt if he like, knows this special trick to do, or like, I've seen the maesters do this with the dragons before, so I'm going to try that, or something like that.
Yeah, or if it's like he's just not afraid because he's not afraid of dragons.
Sure, yeah.
So if because we saw him before, he like says something, he very much seems... It seems like it's tense and he is maybe afraid. I don't know. I think if we could have kept it, maybe it would have been very clear that he is very brave and he's not afraid of dragons because he is a dragon himself. And like that feeling that could have maybe come across.
Yeah.
I don't know. I agree though. So basically Vhagar's sleeping and Aemon tries to climb up the saddle, which I thought it was cool seeing the like rope saddle tied on. I've always wondered how they got up onto the saddles. And he wakes her up. She's going to burn him, and he just uses his training. And it's pretty much that. And then he climbs on the saddle and flies Vhagar. I thought it was kind of silly because he's like falling out of the saddle and manages to get back into it. I mean, I guess it looked cool.
Okay. But I thought the flying shots are actually pretty cool. I thought, again, like sound design, and they fixed the lighting a little bit so I could see Vhagar.
But just like, do they not have... Are you not strapped in?
Yeah, I feel that. I don't know. I can understand because one, he's never like ridden a dragon by himself.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And then he's taking on like the biggest one. So I feel like if they were gonna like knock him out of this, I get it.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. It's believable enough. I guess that's true.
Yeah, the biggest issue for me is just anytime they show like a full body shot of anybody in the dragon saddle, I just think that looks pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it harkens back to like, they do similar shots to like when Dany's riding dragons in Game of Thrones. Like they do close-ups or like medium angles. And I think those are really strong because you don't need to see every movement of the saddle. Because when you try to do that, and I know they have the $100,000 like dragon bull riding thing, but it just, I don't know, right now it just doesn't match as well as I think it needs to for me to fully believe it. Yeah. But when you do those medium shots, or if it's like far away, I think those actually look really good. Like the renderings of the dragons, I feel like look pretty good in this episode.
Yeah, I think so too. You go ahead.
The one shot of like the three of them flying. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was like during the day. It was, I think it was right after the funeral. They like flew all together, and I was like, you know what? That looks really pretty.
Yeah. And while Aemon is flying, the theme starts playing.
Yeah.
The Game of Thrones theme starts playing, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So then Laena and Baela see this, and they wake up Jace because they're like, somebody's stealing Vhagar. And
I like that was in like the next time on House of the Dragon 2, and I just love how she says that.
I know.
Like, she's so cutesy. Someone stole Vhagar.
It's really cute. And Aemon is like got this like strut in his walk, like this kid is freaking killing it.
Yeah.
And he's got this new like, I got a dragon walk about him. And
D-dragon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because he's like so obsessed with dragons.
It's like, it's you. He goes, it's me.
Yeah.
And she goes, that's my mom's dragon. And he goes, your mom's dead.
Yeah, literally.
Like, oh shit.
And I think it's funny because I do think him and Daemon are parallels.
Yeah.
Right? They're very similar. I can totally see Daemon doing something like this as an adult.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of funny because Aemon is like getting the best of all four of them. I think it's Laena that attacks first.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so I'm kind of like, not exactly everything Aemon does afterwards is self-defense, but he didn't attack them first.
True.
I do think he stole Vhagar. He absolutely stole.
That's undeniable, yes.
That is, he absolutely stole that dragon. It should have gone to Laena. And Vhagar should have gone to Laena. And it was just funny because he was like kind of smacking them down one by one.
I know.
And you saw that the last episode where Harwin was like, make sure you train them all. You saw that he's really focusing on Aemon and
Which is,
Aegon.
again, like, I already know he's being trained. So just something before where it's like, I've got the warrior's stance about me or something that, you know? Because, right after when he's all confident, he's like, yeah, you could beat the shit out of 4 kids. I believe that, you know?
And he is the oldest.
He is the oldest.
Right? Yeah.
Of that group. Yeah.
Yeah, of those 5.
Uh-huh.
And so then they all end up like sort of getting the best of him, and he's laying on the ground and they are just like tearing into him. But
and it's crazy. Like,
it
this
is.
is another one, like, just really good sound design. These punches are like right in your ears. Like, it sounds like so good in a bad way, you know?
Yeah, I thought this scene was cool to see how basically the feelings of parents affect the children.
I do like that a lot.
And how this war very much affects the generation.
I was gonna say that I have something later about this, because I can talk about it later actually, because it's cool.
We can come back to it.
But yeah, it's cool, and I also feel like it's fun to, like, these kids are just really selling this scene of, like, they're so angry, and I feel like throughout the episode they're like the cries of pain they've had and like the angry yelling. I just feel like they really sold this fighting scene for me, and it was really fun to watch.
So then Aemond is able to like kick them off, and then he grabs, is it Jace or Lucerys? Who does he grab by the throat?
The youngest one?
I think it's Jacaerys.
Oh, Jacaerys.
Which is the older one.
I think you're right. Yeah, because he punches Lucerys to the ground, right?
So he's holding one of the kids by the throat and starts like threatening him with a rock.
Yeah.
He's got this rock.
Well, and he's like, he's like, I'll feed you, I'll burn you and feed you to my dragon. And I'm like, yeah, you just got a dragon.
And then the kids are feisty. They like throw sand and blind Aemond, and then Lucerys ends up, well, Jace is the one that pulled the dagger out first. Okay. And Lucerys grabs the dagger and ends up splitting it. It's freaking gross. It just like splits his eye. Specifically because Aemond starts calling them bastards.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool scene. I wish it wouldn't have taken 25 minutes of boring television to get here, because once we're here, I'm all in.
Yeah, for sure. And
then we get to the best scene of the episode, which is everyone in front of Viserys after this has happened.
Yeah. And this is sort of what I was talking about earlier. They bicker and this and that happens, and by the end they do this really nice visual of Team Green and Team Black like actually standing opposed to each other.
It was really good.
And I just thought it was really neat that what sort of I would say things have already perspired to like get the war starting.
Yeah,
like, you know, it's kind of a great where it started, but I feel like this incident with the children is like a big turning point, and like sides are formed, which is really cool to me.
Because before this, other people like Daemon was off in Pentos, right? Like things like that. But we saw Kristen quite literally at the end of the scene. Viserys is out of it. Kristen steps in to help Alicent, and Daemon steps in, and Corlys, and they step in towards Rhaenyra. And it's just a really good, that's what I mean by literal storytelling.
Yeah.
So that's a basics moment. That's just basically physically show me by putting people physically on the same sides as each other. We do that in theater all the time.
Yeah.
Is you just show who's on the same side by literally standing them next to each other.
And because you have those visual cues, you can have characters who are more dialogue driven. Like Alicent is wearing her entire heart on her sleeve right now, saying like, I need justice, this and that. And it's not too much, because she's the one who's really like dispensing the literal of what's happening, where everybody else is supplementing with the metaphorical, which is just, it plays really, really well. And this is the dynamic I wanted at the beginning. This is what I wanted everybody, like, that's how these webs are interconnected with each other. You know?
I agree. So basically it comes out that Aemon called them bastards, and Rhaenyra wants him to be questioned. She says he must be questioned where he got it from, and it's very clear that she's implying it was Alicent, which again, it kind of goes back to what you're saying, that there needed to be, there's just no subtext in the funeral scene, and this was a very clear scene of where we understand all the subtext behind it.
Well, and it's kind of weird, because I feel like both of them are sort of the end of their rope, which the last episode did a good job of explaining that, right? Like they kept using that poetic language. Oh, she's backed up into a corner, so she's trying to be nice, and this and that, and both of them are like struggling. But then we sort of end that idea with her going to Dragonstone. And then they come back and have this moment where I feel like this is the end point of that plot line. You know,
we have gotten to the boiling point.
Exactly.
We're at physical blows between people now. There's no decorum or or poetic language.
Allison is literally like, I will have your son's eye.
Right.
You know?
She says, Kristen Cole, I command you, bring me Lucerys's.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And it's weird that there was just like this first episode of pretty solid build up, the dip of them moving, and then it's back, you know?
Yeah.
And we had a boring wedding scene to go through first.
Yeah. Or you mean funeral scene?
Oh yeah, my bad.
Allison basically like can't believe he lost an eye over an insult, and she says, well, where was their father? And she says, is he with his young squires? And is basically insinuating
entertaining his young squires.
And I was like, oh man, see, again, like this is what we need in the funeral scene. They're just, the subtext is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And then Viserys clearly loves Rhaenyra, and he says he does question Aemond in that moment. He makes the decision to ask, where did we hear about this? And Aemond says Aegon. And you see Aegon actually be kind of afraid, which was kind of interesting because he's just been this like jerk this whole time. This like arrogant, lackadaisical, like he does not give a shit about anything. And I thought this dialogue was really strong. He says, we know, Father, we know. Everyone knows. Just look at them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, to have every single person here, every player on the game board here in this room. Yeah. And for someone to openly say, we know.
Yeah. Well, and to cover in such a cool way, which again, like, I feel like that's a product of, you know, Alicent. And again, even like you said in the last episode, like they come in and aside from her being like, his eye's going to be better, right? She's immediately scolding her children again, right? So I feel like this sort of ingrained, because based on what Aegon said, right, it could be a whole other story. Right?
Yeah.
Because like, who did he hear this from? Who's he going to say? Mom told me, you know? Like,
well, I was wondering because that's clearly what Rhaenyra wanted to happen.
Exactly.
And I mean,
yeah, but to like give the most diplomatic answer that still like totally throws the enemy under the bus and keeps everybody else safe. Like I was like, that's an Alicent thing to say, and that was well done, I thought.
Yeah, no, you're right. And before this, Alicent got mad at Aegon and was like, "Where are you? You need to protect your brother," basically. Yeah. So then, Viserys claims that we need to bring our families together, and that he's still sort of claiming this, and demands that they apologize. And Alicent basically says there's a debt to be paid. Yeah. And she says she wants one of Rhaenyra's son's eyes in return. And she says basically like he can choose which eye, which my son did not get that liberty.
Yeah, and everybody's like freaking out at this point, which is really cool. Like all the kids are like getting scared again.
I know, poor little Jason Luke. They were like hugging to Rhaenyra.
That's wild. Kristen's like cracking his knuckles. He's like, I'll kill a child, you know?
And well, yeah, because then Alicent says, Sir Kristen Cole, bring me the eye of Lucerys Valerian.
Damon is leaning.
Yeah, Damon is leaning, as he said in the after episode. And Alicent, I think it's funny because Alicent wanted Otto back so bad because she wanted someone in her corner. Otto says one thing this entire scene. Yeah. And we're about to get to it, but I just, at this moment where she literally says, Kristen Cole, bring me Lucerys Valerian's eye. And he says, and she says, you're sworn to me. And everyone kind of is like getting ready to like stop whatever's going to happen.
Well, because at this point, nobody likes Kristen either.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody's like, oh, are we going to like fight?
Well, we've seen Kristen Cole be not a good person.
Yes.
And basically, he just says, well, I'm sworn to you as your protector. Yeah. And I think it's kind of funny or just interesting that everyone believes, I thought he might do it.
Oh, for sure.
I very much thought he might pull his blade out and do this. And part of that is because we've seen him be violent before. Yeah. And we know his loyalty to Alicent, but
he has just a very like twisted moral compass. Yeah. You know, like I would not put it past him.
Well, and I didn't say this last episode, but Alicent is very much a hypocrite, right? But so is Kristen Cole. Yeah. And I think they're very, very similar characters. And it's funny that Kristen Cole brutally beat Joffrey to death. And then Harwin Strong lays a few punches on him and gets evicted.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and so I just that's just kind of a funny like hypocrite moment that I just caught. But Viserys basically says it's finished, and he says anyone who questions their birthright will have their tongue removed. And then Alicent, she straight up grabs Viserys' dagger and charges at the kids. And this wouldn't be possible if Viserys was at his like A game of health. Yes. And that makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a good because it's literally taking the choice out of his hands, right? And that's when the line is drawn after that. So it's very clearly like whatever shield that the king who loves everybody had, like that is gone, right?
Yeah.
Like we are on sides, and he's not going to stop us.
Yeah,
you know?
and so then Damon is gonna go. He sort of runs in to protect Rhaenyra, or probably he was gonna go get Alicent. Probably is what he was gonna do. And Kristen Cole goes and grabs Damon. So now those two are sparing off, and it allows for, which is kind of like,
I think it's Kristen was gonna go, and then Damon blocks.
No, I think it was Damon first.
I don't think so. I think he moved to catch Kristen. Like, I think his main objective was to block the stopping of what was happening.
So basically, it just makes it more believable that they'd have this standoff moment because the two men have each other basically pinned, and she's holding this dagger at Rhaenyra, and this is the dagger. This is the prophecy dagger. It's right in front of the fire, and she is sort of just has it poised at Rhaenyra, and this is the only thing Otto says this whole time. He says, tells her to release the blade. That's it. That's the only thing he said. And did you notice anything about like the knife in this scene particularly?
The like physical knife?
Yeah.
Aside from that, it was like the blade. I don't think so. Why?
Okay, because there's a trivia fact on IMDb, and I didn't get this. So when Alicent tries to stab Lucerys with the prophecy dagger, and Rhaenyra blocks her, she holds it in front of the fire, and Rhaenyra sees that the prophecy isn't shown through the fire. You don't see the prophecy even though it's in front of the fire.
Okay.
And which means that Alicent's line is not going to bring the prince who is promised. And Rhaenyra knows that. And that is supposed to explain why after this incident she wants to actively take the throne. Like, she notices it. I didn't get that.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize only the like line could see the prophecy. Like the carving on the dagger? Really?
That's just what the IMDb fact says.
It's kind of weird. Because she doesn't talk about it either. And I feel like that's a pretty important like something a lot of people would not catch, you know?
Yeah, so I just was wondering if maybe I missed it, but it seems like a reach, but if that is what happened, it was cool.
Interesting.
I think it would have been cooler if it was clear, though.
Interesting. Because at this point, I don't really know how into the prophecy Rhaenyra is. Like, I don't think
she believes it. Later on, she calls it a story.
I think she's still like, I want my dad to love me. And I think her reasoning for wanting to take the throne is more than anything to just protect her kids at that point, you know? So yeah, I don't know if that vibes well with me, but I mean, it's cool, I guess. I did figure it was like the dagger.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell that it was the dagger, but yeah, I didn't get that. I was wondering if maybe you did, but
no.
So then Rhaenyra says something really good. She says, exhausting, isn't it, hiding behind your cloak of your own righteousness, but now they see you as who you are, and that leads Alicent to like slicing Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Pretty badly too. That could have been a really bad cut. And the fighting truly ends when Aemon says, do not mourn, I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon. And that's what Viserys ends it, and that's really what ends the meeting, and that's when they take their sides. And it was good. It was really good, them sort of symbolizing that scene. Yeah,
it was strong.
And then the rest of the episode is just okay for me. So Otto and Alicent have a very short scene, and Alicent basically says that people are calling her mad, and that she sort of has basically lost all her cards. She's not going to be able to. Viserys isn't going to see her as who she was.
And again, I feel like they just missed an opportunity. Like, I think the scene has a place. I just feel like they needed to play it up more. Like, it was so frustrating to see them both acting courtly to each other again. Like, she literally just tried to stab a child. Like, I want her to stay crazy for a little while and like be like, why weren't you there for me? I got you back. Da 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 da. And then he's like, this is all part of the plan. You know?
Well, they were talking almost in the same way that Corlys and the vibe felt the same as the Corlys and Rhaenys scene.
It's like they didn't just witness what the fuck just happened.
Yeah, so I'm saying that basically those two scenes felt the same stakes and the same amount of sort of pressure on the characters, and I feel like you have to have variety within scenes, and this scene just felt very much like two people talking.
Mm-hmm.
I did think what Otto said was cool. He said he's never seen that side of her. And now he knows she wants to win the game.
Yeah.
And that now Alicent sees who Rhaenyra really is. I feel like it was a lost opportunity.
Yeah,
it was fine. And that Otto says Aemon's right and the price was worth it to win Vhagar. Then we move to Rhaenyra getting stitches from the Maester.
Yeah.
Sorry. Rhaenyra getting stitches from the Maester and Laenor walks in.
Throughout the episode, the prosthetics were really nice.
They were.
Aemon's eye, her arm, like they just looked very, very good. And not in like the gross way that like a lot of prosthetics usually are like trying to look like, you know? They just looked really good.
Yeah, it looked real. It looked gritty. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And basically this whole scene is all about how Laenor should have been better and should have been a better father and should have defended Rhaenyra.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I should have been there. And she says, those should have been our house words. And
I thought that was a funny quip.
I did too.
But again, especially after what happens at the end of this episode, like this is just a worthless scene.
The scene that's exactly what I put in there. It means nothing because he basically says, I'm gonna be better. And I thought it was cool because the actor had another very insightful thing. He basically said that losing a loved one means you start reflecting on your own life and make changes. Yeah. But that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
This scene could have been cut out of the episode and nothing would have changed.
Well, what I think could have been a neat transition is, so the rest of the episode, they're all riding back to their various places. And Rhaenyra decides that she's going to do this big plan where she wants to marry Daemon to have a stronger claim, to really get moving on becoming the queen, all this and that. Daemon tells her that we can't get married until like Laenor is dead. And she reveals that they're going to hatch a plot to like fake his death, which is really cool. And this is it works well. I think this ending scene is really cool because Daemon is like narrating what's going to happen while the things are happening, which is what I think they were trying to do the last episode.
Yeah, I was going to say it's one for one what the last episode did, just better.
Which I'm like, oh, good job. You finally did it. But you did it right after again.
I know,
so I'm like, y'all, come on. You know?
So you shouldn't have ended that episode before like
exactly.
this. It was weird.
And we can talk in order. But what I think should have happened was that scene can happen. Because I do feel like one more last, like, Laenor, like, I'm sorry, I'll never do this again. And she's like, no, you're going to help me a different way.
Yes.
And then it kicks the next scene off. And that would have been a cooler transition to me.
And now the scene actually matters.
Exactly.
Or that's the scene where she gets the idea. Yeah.
And that's literally just one sentence that could have made the scene not worthless, you know?
Exactly. And so then Viserys and Alicent are riding home and Viserys isn't doing well. Alicent tries to apologize, but he doesn't want to speak of it. And then we get to Daemon and Rhaenyra speaking, and they have some really cool lines. We've got, they're watching basically the King's Landing crew heading off sailing back to King's Landing.
Flying off with the ship.
And, Corlys and Rhaenys are also watching the ship leaving. And they kind of just start talking about like fire versus the sea and
very metaphorical, very cool. This is silly, but at one point she says, "I need you, uncle," and both of us went, "Ugh."
I literally made a noise. I was like, oh.
And it's just funny because again, like in the world, not only of Game of Thrones, but like in the real world, like incest is like super looked down upon, and it's funny because like. Historically, like at this point, that's like pretty normal, I would say. Like it's not something frowned upon, but it's funny to just interject it in that way because it's so jarring, you know?
Yeah. Well, especially because people like ship them.
Yes.
So I think it's sort of this like, I'm going to pretend they're not related. And they hit us with the, I need you, uncle.
I need you, uncle. Yeah.
It was harsh.
But the rest of it's cool. They're speaking High Valyrian. Yeah. We love when they do that.
They say some cool things. They talk about how like fire is a strange power, but it's also a prison, and that the sea offers an escape. And it's cool because basically the Valyrian people were never dragon riders. Yeah. And that is why they have this sort of like ship empire and why they are seafaring people, because that is how they made their money. You know, that's how they had strength and power, was their ability for that. So I just think that's really cool. And we're kind of cutting back and forth. We see on the ship, Laris offers his service, basically an eye for an eye is what he's planning to do. And she says, the day might come where I might need you and what you're doing, but no, I don't need that right now. And then we get Rhaenyra says, I cannot face the Greens alone, which is the first time we hear them called the Greens.
Specifically, which I thought was neat.
And basically, she says her claim to the throne would be stronger with Daemon, which makes sense, it would be. And we see them like hatching this plan, and they seem to want to. Daemon seems invested in what she's saying, and they hatch Laenor, planning for him to be.
Yeah, and again, I think it's shown in a really fun way. Like we see as Damon's narrating, we see him talking to Carl with a cue, and you're like, what is going on? And then he meets up with Laenor in the house, and I'm like, what? They loved each other. Why are they fighting each other? And then it's revealed at the end that this thing, and it's just really well done. You know,
I thought it was well done too.
Super cool.
Because we don't as an audience necessarily know what they're planning. It's supposed to feel like, I know because I've seen the episode now before, but it's supposed to feel like, oh, they killed that man. Exactly. Right? It's supposed to be like Rhaenyra killed her husband.
Yeah, and when you're doing things, you're leaving it so up to confusion. Like we know Carl just like probably wouldn't do that, right? Or like, oh my gosh, his character's dead. But they're pacing it so well. The cutting is so fast but easy to follow that by the time you're really like, this doesn't make any sense. Oh, you know what I'm saying? It's just really well done.
Yeah, and so then they have sort of like the body burned in flames, and Corlys and Rhaenys are like distraught over it, and then it sort of ends with Rhaenyra and Daemon saying it's worth it and it'll help our enemies see what we're capable of. So you're kind of like, oh shit, like yeah they're gonna do that. And Rhaenyra even basically says like the realm will think it was me, and Daemon's like, let him think that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it ends with this marriage on the beach, and Laenor and Carl with a cue. Yeah. And then Carl with a cue and Laenor running away together and sailing off together.
Yeah.
And I think that was a strong ending of an episode. I think it was a strong way to showcase this information. Emma Darcy had some really cool things to say also about this moment. They said that Rhaenyra and Daemon are made of the same stuff. It's why they are a terrible match. And they really also said it's a dangerous chemistry. And I was like, I need you to let Emma Darcy tell me all about their character. Like, it's so cool. And they said basically Rhaenyra's fear of abandonment is healed when Daemon accepted her. And so the character of Rhaenyra is no longer trying to shield from these rumors, but take them head on, because it's this fear of abandonment has been healed. And I just thought that was a really interesting take on the character. And I do feel like that showed in what they did in the episode. I don't know. Overall, I think the episode had really strong moments, but like the bad was just so bad.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I don't know if the strong moments were that strong. Like they were good, you know?
They were interesting. I think.
I feel like, again, it's just like, I appreciate them trying things. I just wish they would land more.
Yeah.
Like I wish they would just sit down and really think through these ideas, right? Because it sort of feels like each episode has had like a thing. Like this one I feel is this long drawn out funeral scene, and then these other sort of thing. And I'm like, can you like spend just one more day and really figure out how these complement each other and how all these things can fit together in the most succinct way?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of fat on every episode that they could trim. And maybe that's like needing to make every episode an hour long or something like that. But I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that can be cut or rearranged or worked around.
Yeah, I think it is trying to expand things, because if you think about the Game of Thrones books are like thousands of words, right? Like how many pages is a Game of Thrones books? Like 600 maybe?
Something like that.
And season 1 spans like 80 pages, I think is what it is, of House of the Dragon. So that's just really, really hard to pull out 10 episodes. You're not even getting 10 pages an episode.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because whenever you watch series based on books, you're always like, man, they had to cut that out. You know, man, we didn't get all of this. And so they had a really unique opportunity where they could literally put everything that's in the books and the shows, and then they get to fill in the blanks. And I feel like they're filling in the blanks so poorly.
Which has been the problem continuously. Like the plot, the events that are happening is fine. It's great. But the motivations and character choices are just very hit or miss throughout. And like we said, there are some really strong episodes so far that have shined. There are some episodes that have been, on the whole, not great. But I think this one is another one that just sort of falls in the middle. Like, it's okay. And it's frustrating because I can see the potential of how it could have been very good.
It's actually incredibly frustrating because I think the scene from Aemond walking in and the kids fighting all the way to the end in that hall, or in the like sort of throne room area, and all that whole chunk of time, loved it. Yes. Amazing storytelling. I'm on the edge of my seat. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Acting, phenomenal. The cinematography, fantastic, right? Everything beginning to end was amazing. And so it is so sad to see that y'all can knock something out of the park so great and then just miss so hard in the exact same episode. How do you do that? It's like, it's not like someone is writing just specific scenes, or maybe that is how it is. I don't know. It's really odd to me. It's really odd. Anything else you want to say?
I don't know. I'm curious. So we're 7 episodes in. There are 10 episodes total, right? So this is, I mean, if there's any sort of, this is the time to ramp up. So if all goes well, hopefully the next couple episodes really solidify like what the season was and do that. I'll be honest, we've seen it, but I don't remember a whole lot, you know? So I'm excited to rewatch and see what's happening. I definitely, we preached about this a lot. If you're going to watch, if by some reason you're listening to this without watching House of the Dragon, or maybe you like want to watch it again, like very recommend binging it. Very recommend watching it close together. Very helpful for things. Yeah. Because they do, like, it's like we sort of talked about, there are parts where the details are just really finely tuned and you're like, oh, I remember that. And they didn't tell me that specifically, but I remember it. And then it's scenes where people are saying exactly what they mean and you're not learning anything.
Or scenes where you don't even know what character that is.
Yeah.
So it's really weird. There's some high highs and some really low lows. I want to bring up, I think we got some good character moments for Rhaenyra this episode. I wish we had more. I think they're a little bit afraid to give Rhaenyra a strong character with strong flaws, you know?
Yeah.
I did just really like that when Laenor was saying, I hate the gods for making me how I am, and Rhaenyra basically says, I don't, you're an honorable man with a good heart. I thought that was a really sweet moment between them, because since their first sort of meeting and discussion, we haven't really seen them connect. We've just sort of seen them be arguing. And so this was nice to see that we haven't even really seen a good side of Laenor.
Yeah. Which is when they first met, I felt like they were setting it up very much to be like, they would actually be pretty good friends and just like have sex with other people.
Yeah.
And I totally get cutting to 10 years later and he's like not doing his job and he's not doing it great.
Well,
and like
he
that
lost
can be angry.
like, he had a very traumatic experience.
Yeah,
and
for
he
sure.
seemed never
it's justified.
Yeah, and he seemed to never really want the responsibility of the crown.
Yes.
And
but to you, what you're saying, it is very cool to see like a non-stressed, angry at each other moment of just them sort of being together.
And I wish that maybe, I'm going back a little bit, but I wish maybe they could have tied in that line with the idea of her realizing you cannot be something that you're not. So I want to help you be free.
Yeah.
And she could have used that sort of idea of like, I see that you are living this lie and that's so terrible for you. And let's figure out a way that we can both be happy.
Yeah. And again, like, if you're going to do that, because so far they've painted this very much from the side of Rhaenyra with him not doing what he needs to be doing, right? Whereas focusing that mind shift, not to say like that it's justified, obviously, but if we can see her struggling with like, you need to be here, but I also like, I get it, that would make it a lot stronger to end his arc as a propeller up to the whole marrying Daemon thing. You know, like they can intertwine in a really fun way and they just sort of do it a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. I'm excited to finish out the rest of the season.
Okay, I have a quote. It's a short one.
Let's go.
Otto didn't talk very much this episode, but Allison basically says like her actions were ugly to him, and he tells Allison we play an ugly game. And I think that's interesting because Otto is so quiet and you think he's going to be really mad at Allison, and he basically says it's like you kind of got to fight dirty is what he says.
It's neat. I feel like he really he walks a fine line between like being selfish, but also being selfish for the right reasons.
Yeah.
You know, like in my mind, Otto is somebody who like, if he were in charge, everything probably would be kind of good.
Yeah.
You know? But at the same time, like that is very much for his personal gain as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cool character that we've seen before, but it's like in a different context, in a different time. And I think it works really well for the other characters.
It's interesting because I find myself always questioning his motivation.
Yes.
And it feels purposeful.
It's very
which
cool.
is nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's been this episode. Thanks so much for listening or watching, depending on what platform you're on. If you enjoyed sharing this, commenting, any interaction you can give helps to spread this to more people, which is always what we're looking for. I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this has been
Welcome to the Writers' Room.
We'll see you next time.